What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another amazing episode here on the Veteran Influencers Network. Once again, Chris Levine. And today, as always, with every show, we have a special guest. Our special guest today is Mike Liguori. Mike.
Man, it is just so good to be here. We were talking a little bit before the show, man. So it's so great to connect with fellow veterans and someone like yourself, man. So I appreciate your time and having me on the show.
Hey, absolutely. And it's just initially our correlation and correspondence with each other between me and you, and then myself and your booking agent. It was just absolutely amazing, very professional. And you were very patient. We had a little bit of miscommunication with the time, and I do really appreciate you being patient with that. It's just so great to be able to work with another professional that also served our country as well.
All right. Well, absolutely, man. Thank you for that. I received that. Well, and also, we can blame daylight savings time too. Like I can't wait for it to actually get removed because this time zone stuff, man, it's crazy. I living in Arizona too. There is no time. Like we don't shift times. So, even still, it messes everybody else up. Like I'm okay, but everybody else is, I guess, is still adjusting.
Well, no, absolutely. And, I'm very excited about it. I can already tell that there's going to be some chemistry for this interview, and some interviews I get a little bit more excited than others. I'm very excited for it. And like I said, I appreciate you taking time to join the platform for today.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right, let's get into it. So I want to talk about baby Mike. What was it like growing up in Palo Alto, California?
Yeah, well, baby Mike came into the world on November 11th, 1983. And so I was born on Veterans Day. So to be able to serve in the military later in life was really, I guess you could say, just looking back on it, I guess you could say it was part of my destiny. Just being born on Veterans Day, and not only that, joining the Marine Corps, which is November 10th, is the Marine Corps birthday. So you could probably assume that the 2 days in November for me was like a 48-hour birthday bash, man. It was I had some good times in the Corps, but anyway, I digress. Growing up for me in the Bay Area, it was really, I had a very interesting life. From a very young age, because my parents divorced when I was 8. And I don't remember too much of what life was like in my early part of my childhood. I remember a lot from the time I was 8 forward, because that was the age in which my parents divorced. And so dad left the house and, moved about a couple miles away in the same town. And he was a man that was looking to pick up and create a new life for himself after being married to my mom. My mom, on the other hand, was also creating a new life for herself. No college education at the time. She had been to some college, but she didn't have a degree. And her main responsibility, I would say, was taking care of us, because my dad worked full time. He's an entrepreneur. So now imagine a single mom with nothing but a house to her name, looking to rebuild her life with 2 kids, my younger brother, who's about 5 years younger than me. And we were not easy. We were not easy kids to raise. And so, going from a household where, it seemed stable to now 2 separate households, and watching both of my parents go through this transformation, this evolution, and they're all like the second win, the second chapter in their lives, started something pretty profound for me, which was, learning how to live out of a bag. And I mean a literal duffel bag. I would go to my mom's house Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, every other weekend, in terms of the court arrangement for, how you split time with the parents. And my dad was Wednesday, Fridays, and every other weekend. So you can imagine my entire life was a duffel bag. I was packing clothes Monday, Tuesday, getting ready to go to dad's on Wednesday, then going back to mom's on Thursday, then back to dad's on Friday, and then switching off weekends. So I was always mobile. I guess you could say it was good training for me because, being in the Marines, got a couple sea bags.
How was the impact with that? Because I'm kind of dealing with that right now with my son. And I know there's I talk to a lot of vets, and I know they deal with the same type thing as far as the custody things. I see my son for the summers, and, if I'm able to for the winter, sometimes he goes with his mom for Christmas. So how did that affect you overall? Like, I understand the actual logistical part of it, but how did it affect you mentally?
Um, it gave me a very early impression on that stability in my life was lacking. And I don't think it was so much of a fault to anybody. I don't think it wasn't an intentional thing. Like my mom and dad wasn't like, we're going to make your life a living nightmare by having you just switch back and forth between houses. But what it did is it gave me this early impression that nothing in life was stable and that I always had to be on the move and I always had to make adjustments and I always had to make sure that I was going to be in a place for a certain amount of time. I had to learn how to pack. I had to learn how to prepare very quickly. Um, traveling in that, traveling in that scenario also forces you to grow up a lot faster because in that sense, for me, at least my personal reflection on this, you know, being able to be around long enough to cultivate at the time friendships in the neighborhood with other kids. I was part of that last generation where we knew what it was like before the internet came around. You used to be able to go out and play and the street lights would come on and mom would tell you to come home. So I was never there long enough though to really cultivate like strong, meaningful childhood relationships in the neighborhood because I would be there for 2 days, but I'd have to go to dad's the next day. And if I missed a sleepover, if I missed an event of some sort, I had to move. And so that a lot for me was, it was hard to be able to make permanent friendships where I was in one location, but I learned very quickly how to make friends wherever I went because I was always traveling from such a young age. So that was the impression that it made on me when I was a kid.
Yeah, I'm telling you, for those, I don't wish that upon anybody to have divorced
Mm,
parents. And obviously, like you said, you do have to grow up a little bit faster. You gotta, um, as they say, suck it up a little bit because there's gonna be a lot of hard
yeah,
times between only seeing your friends during the summer, and then when those guys move away, so you only see them during the summer. Now they're gone. You no longer have that access to that consistent friendship or people in your life. Um, so this was during the early 90s because 83 8 when you're
yeah,
8 years old, so early 90s. So the dynamic of the household was still, typically the man works, the woman takes care of the household. I mean, obviously that some women still worked, but that was kind of like the general like concept of a household. So mom went from having stability with a marriage and having someone that was able to more or less provide for her. And
mhm,
now she's trying to figure out her career path. How was that transition for her, going from that to now she has to try to figure out, because there was no internet really back then. It's not like
yeah,
you could just be married and have your own business online and
yeah.
a little bit more access to this information. You had to like stop your life now and go figure out what you're gonna do. Like how did she transition in that?
Um, I think it was really hard for her given that, I went to Catholic school and in the Catholic Church, especially in the school system, it's a very traditional, very rigid structure. The integrity of the family stays intact, including the marriage. Divorce was frowned upon at that time, even though the divorce rate was incredibly high. I still think today it hovers around even the 50, 60% mark. But back then, it was not socially acceptable to be divorced. So here now you have separated parents, and I was one of a few kids. I actually think I was one of a few kids in the entire school whose parents were divorced. And so for my mom to, be invited to school functions but not have a husband there, or be um, or be involved or included in the PTA discussions and being seen, or even parent teacher conferences, right? Where it was like the mom and the dad were not together, but they're in the same room and they're
Mm,
trying to parent the same child, but they can't stand being in the same room with each other because they had just gotten divorced and there's still like residual resentment and anger from court dealings. I think for my mom, what it did is it inspired her to be able to step into her own individual power to create a life for herself. And I thought that was very empowering to watch from a young age because my mom was so fearless. Like she wasn't afraid of it. That doesn't mean it wasn't difficult, but watching my mom go from being the primary household, like I just run the household and that's it, to now working, coming home, preparing dinner, doing everything she can to keep the lights on, to keep the bills going, to make sure that my brother and I had a very smooth childhood, I think was really hard for her. And I remember, man, there were some months where, it was cool for us to get seconds for dinner. We were two grown boys. I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'2", I'm over 200 pounds, former college football player. And my brother's bigger than me. So imagine our growth spurts at that time. And you're looking at mom after she does a Costco run and, the fridge is full of everything. And then like a week later, it's just cleaned out.
Fact.
So there were, right. And so like in a month, I remember there were months where it was like, cool, this is like the second meal month, right? Like we could get extra food and mom wasn't regulating us or rationing the food. And then there would be some months where mom would just politely say, hey, I just got to let you know, like, it's going to be a little tight this month. But she never told us we couldn't have stuff. She just always told us it was going to be a little bit tight. And it was the same thing with the utility bills, like, hey, like we kind of need to not keep the lights on all the time. But at my dad's was financially pretty well off. I mean, he was doing a lot better, but I never went to my dad's and was like, hey, you got to turn the lights off because like we're running up the bill and the power company's going to come after us. It was like, my dad was like, hey, turn the lights off. Like, this isn't a barn here. It was kind of more of his own preference as opposed to that. But to go back to my mom, I think watching my mom try to find herself again, rediscover herself, so to speak, at that age after so much battling and so much struggle, and watching this kind of reinvention of her own well-being happening was very powerful. But I think it was very challenging and hard for her.
Yeah, that's like I said, my parents divorced when I was real young too, so I was able to kind of like watch that dynamic. And it never does seem easy, but one thing I will do is I have to give my parents props because there's a lot of things you don't see as kids. And, now that I'm old and I can and I've experienced it and I can kind of look back, there were times where my mom would call, my dad would answer, they'd have civil conversations on the phone. And believe me, it wasn't always pretty. But a lot of people can't even do that. So, whatever my parents went through, they found a way to at least be civil because it was about the kids. And then they did everything they could to keep all that negative stuff away from us. So like we saw it a little bit because, it just happens to come out. But some people just are real obvious about it and they don't care about hiding it from their kids. And I appreciate my parents for trying to keep that away from me, kind of keep that away from us,
Yeah. And I think something you said that was so powerful was, your parents doing the best that they could. And I think that's something that a lot of us take for granted with our relationships with our parents, because when we really think about really loving our parents and having a true relationship and bond for them, a bond with them, a lot of that really comes down to the idea of accepting them for the best that they could with what they have at the time that they have it. And a lot of us don't recognize or even see what mom and dad do for us in terms of providing for us and making sure that we have the most comfortable, the most straightforward life. And parents do everything they can to shield that, to shield the negativity and the bad stuff, because life gets more and more challenging in different seasons and different stages of your life. And so to inundate a child from a very young age with all of that, really the hard stuff, the lights staying on, the food rationing, the travel back and forth, there's only so much that you could keep back. And there's only so much that you can, quote, hide from them. And I think a lot of times we as people don't really give our parents enough credit for their effort. And, and that's not to say every single parent is, on top of their game. There are really amazing parents out there and there are parents that are not. But there's also really amazing kids out there, and there's some kids that are not really amazing, right? Right. Yeah. Like, so it works. It's a two-way street. But I think in this context, being able to really recognize that our parents in the lens of them doing the best that they can with what they have at the time that they have, and really learning to truly accept that they're just putting their best foot forward with what they know at the time, with what they have. Like my mom did the best that she could. My dad did the best that she could. And that was the best way that they could provide at that time. So it's really interesting when you talk about the type of effort that parents put forward. Is I think a lot of us really don't allow ourselves to fully receive and fully accept mom and dad. We accept with contingencies or conditions. Like, yeah, like I had a roof over my head, and this is an example of a contingency. I had a roof over my head. Mom let me play Sega Genesis or N64, and that just goes to show you how old I am, right? Like N64, Sega Genesis, but there were some months I couldn't get seconds. There were some months where we had to like regulate the power. There were some months where my mom just had to ground me because my dad didn't ground me and I wasn't with my dad, you know, or I didn't do my homework. I didn't apply myself. And so, you know, those are those conditions that we really look at as we judge them and we keep the scorecard with them. And, you know, mom was great, but dad was great. But and a lot of those things, I think we just don't allow ourselves to fully accept and receive our parents as they are.
Yeah, it's like the initial group of people that you spend time with, like from the time you were born. So like that's, you know, the first picture that you see of humans that have responsibility, like direct responsibility that, you know, that you're able to see on a day-to-day basis, authority, responsibility. And you just think your parents, because your parents hold you to this high standard. So you're like, oh, they got to be perfect, you know? But in reality, when you get older, you realize, especially, you know, when you do have kids, you realize it's not what it seems to be. And I think once you get older and you do have kids, you do realize that your parents did a lot better job than you gave them credit for growing up. So everybody's like, oh, every time they'd said no to something, oh, they're the worst parent in the world. But then now you catch yourself saying no. You're like, oh my God, I sound exactly like them.
Right. And, you know, we're all we're all in some form or fashion a version of our parents, whether we want to admit it or not. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever you want to call it, we are all a version of our parents. And I think part of that is that we want to parent, or we want to be as far away as possible from mom and dad. Right? Because those conditions lead into desires and goals for ourselves. Mom was great, but so I'm not going to have that when I have children or when I become a parent, when even become a husband or a wife, whoever's listening to this and whatever season of life you're in your relationship. We do a lot of things to reject the idea that our parents did a certain amount of things for us and we don't want to have that. So we're going to do better than them. So we kind of distance ourselves from that. And some of us had really amazing parents. Like some of us had really amazing parents and we wish to emulate them in relationship. We wish to emulate them in being a father or a mother. In the context of parents where we put those conditions and those labels on them, we actually end up creating distance and rejection. Mom, I don't want to be anything like my mom or like my dad because of the way that I grew up, and I want to give my kids everything that I didn't have. But here's the irony in this. The more you actually reject the idea that you are going to become your mom and dad, guess what? You actually end up becoming more like them. So you think you're putting this wall or this border between you and your parents, but you're actually not, because you're resisting or fighting fighting the acceptance of being like them or accepting them as they are. And so when you distance yourself like that, you actually end up saying stuff that your dad says that used to like piss you off, saying stuff or doing stuff that your mom did that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm acting just like my mom. So that rejection piece is really important, because if we continue to reject our parents, we actually end up becoming more like them, which in turn does what? Reject ourselves.
Yo, that's incredible, because the way your parents are is kind of a piece of you. Your parents gave you a piece of them, and if you I guess it seems like what you're saying is, if you reject the piece that your parents gave to you, you're rejecting yourself.
Yeah, because you're becoming just like them, because you live in spite, and you're living in anger, and you're living in resentment. And generally what happens is that when you resist, it persists. The it being the idea that you're not going to be your parents. But it's because the energy and your attention and focus is gravitating towards what your mom and dad were like that you're choosing to reject. So it's on the front part of your brain. It's on the focal point of your brain. I don't want to be like them. And when you keep saying that out loud, you end up becoming them because that's all you're thinking about. Rather, you can operate from a place of acceptance, grace, and love for your parents. That being, I'm very grateful and I'm thankful that my parents raised me the way that they did. And they did the best they could with what they had at the time that they had it. I am choosing now to take my own experience given from my mom and given from my dad, and I'm going to create an entire new life for myself and for my children and for my family that is better than what I received, not out of rejection, but out of abundance, out of opportunity, out of creation, because I would like to provide myself a better life and also my family a better life. But I'm not going to do that from the lens of rejecting my parents. I'm going to do that from the lens of accepting my parents. That's a big difference.
Yo, that.
I love that. Thank you for the claps. Live studio audience, everybody.
This is.
Thank you.
I love hearing that. That is absolutely great. And it's like, I did a lot of that. I feel guilty right now. I feel like I'm being targeted. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, yeah, but you should. But see, that's but that's the thing though, is that guilt and shame are such powerful emotions for us. And if you find yourself, especially with you, if you find yourself in the energy of feeling guilt or shame, remember the same thing about accepting your parents doing the best that they could with what they had at the time and they have it applies to you also. It applies to you also. You have to be able to accept yourself. And for parents out there who may be feeling guilt or shame after hearing what I just said, maybe for parents right now that are going, man, my mom and dad effed me up and they did some crazy stuff and I don't want to be anything like them. And you might be hearing me talking right now going, man, I'm more like my dad and my mom than I ever wanted to be. I want you to stop going on the guilt and the shame train. And I want you to zoom out, take a step back. And I want you to love and accept yourself right now for everything that you've done and everything that you are. Because once you're able to do that, good, bad, right, or wrong, you've accepted the things you did not know at that time. But you now have an opportunity and the choice for you to move forward. So you can say, yep, I messed up, quote, whatever that is. Yeah, I feel guilty and I feel shameful, whatever that is. But what if I was able to say, hey, you know what? I didn't know at the time, and that was a mistake. And I'm going to forgive myself for not knowing. And I'm going to love on my child because he might have some sort or she might have some sort of resentment or anger from a very young age because I did something that maybe was in alignment or was not in alignment with what I wanted for my life. And so because of that, can I allow myself to step into the energy and the power of being a better father and being a better mother and also being a better man or woman, a better version of yourself? And if you can do that, then any mistake, anything that you deem a mistake or deem wrong or something that wasn't in alignment for you, you can move through it incredibly fast. And you're also teaching your children the art of forgiveness because what they learn from you, you learned from your parents. So if your parents have a tendency to beat up on themselves, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, all you threes out there, right? The achievers, if I don't do something and get a winning result, the competitors out there beat themselves up. The threes out there, they love to beat themselves up, right? And it's because they're hard on themselves because they love achievement. But you inherit those from your parents. And I talk a lot about that in the book, where you inherit these generational traits and curses from your parents. And if you don't want your child to have those things, well, first of all, tough, because they're learning from you. They're a sponge. They're learning every single thing from you. But if you want to teach them new habits, if you want to teach them new things, the opportunity that you have right now is you have to learn to accept yourself and love yourself first, because you are going to mess up. And you have to be able to teach them that level of self-love and forgiveness at a very young age, because when you do, they'll be able to forgive you and love you where you're at. Because if you're able to do it for yourself, you can do it for other people.
Yeah, it's man, like talking to a lot of friends that I grew up with, a majority of my friends had parents like both their parents. And listen, this isn't a sad story, like poor me. It's more so to give context. Like, and now granted, I had two stepmoms growing up. You know, one got divorced, another one. So it's not like I didn't always have two parents, but let's be honest, you know, having both your original parents is a little different than having a step parent. There's no offense, because I know step parents do the best they can. It's just hard that you can't replace your, you know, your biological parent. And I would watch, you know, the kids with their parents or whatever, and it's like sometimes I'd just be so jealous, like, man, like how come my parents couldn't make it work? And here I am divorced. You know what I'm saying? So like that kind of ties into what you were saying before. It's like, you know, the more you try to be the opposite of, you know, of what your parents were, like, oh, I can do better than that. And then here I am in the same situation to where I experienced the same thing. So you never quite know why something happened, or, you know, what went through the process of it happening. Or they could have did this, they could have did this. And then now you're asking yourself the same thing. Could I have done something different?
Yeah. And a lot of that is means of attraction, right? And a lot of things to kind of just take a step back and look at life. You know, there is something about law of attraction. It is very true. It happens in you know, whether you subscribe to law of attraction or you don't, things exist to you because of your attention and focus and awareness of it. That's the only way that things exist. When you think about something, it exists. That's it. So if you think about, right, like, and so when you think about a majority of the time, all the time, how negative somebody is to you, how negative you think you are, how negative your parents were, that becomes the dominant way that you see the world. And the way that you see yourself is from that negative lens. And that negative lens does impact people around you. People don't want to be around you. People are going to learn from you, especially your children. They are going to learn that type of negativity. And if you are right now listening to this and having an awareness around, man, maybe I could change my attitude, or I don't want to be like mom and dad, or you're sitting in some of the regret of something, you know, it sounds like to you, like the regret of something that you had no control over. You just didn't. And that's not your fault at all. But for kids, it's very difficult for them to not take some sort of responsibility. When I was 8 years old, I thought it was my fault my parents got divorced. I had nothing to do with it. But when I was 8 years old, I would hear them scream, like, why are they fighting? And they would never tell me. But I'm a kid, and it's like, oh, they must get divorced because they don't love me. That's how kids think. And so, you know,
tough.
It is really tough, right? And it's tough for a lot of children. I think for us to be able to change the way that we parent, to change the way that we interact with individuals, and the way that we want to change your lives. And if we all have a desire, anybody watching this has a desire to be able to change your life, I want you to pay attention to the things that you are paying attention to, which is, what are you thinking about? How do you see your parents? How do you see your job? How do you see your network? How do you see where you live? How do you see the car that you drive? If you don't see those things out of gratitude and appreciation, and you're seeing those things out of regret, shame, or guilt, or total rejection, that is the way that your life is going to go. It's either going to be in a state of, you know, resentment, rejection, shame, and guilt, or it's going to be in like gratitude or appreciation. And either way, your life is going to take two very different paths based upon the way that you see yourselves. And your kids are going to be able to see you the exact same way. If they see mom and dad was super ugly, you know, looking at life, if they have a really ugly attitude, they're going to have an ugly attitude. If mom and dad have an amazing, amazing viewpoint of life where it's optimistic, it's enthusiastic, it's filled with gratitude and appreciation for the things that they have, the child more than likely is going to be grateful and appreciative. And that's also a slippery slope too, because, you know, sometimes kids that grow up in very affluent families, like, you know, we've all heard the story about kids who grew up in really affluent families, sometimes have a spoiled attitude. Right. And then there's kids who don't have anything, and it's like, you know, clean plate syndrome, you know, where it's like they start making money and they start doing like really well for themselves, but it's like they're scarfing and woofing down the food. They're like cleaning their plate as much as they can because they still are programmed in their mind from a very young age that this might be the last time that they eat. And I suffered from that. I even at times, like no lie, I still at times, that programming is still in my head. Like it's still there. Like I'm sitting with my girlfriend, and we'll be at our house and I'm eating dinner, and I'll immediately like gravitate to trying to get seconds. And I'm like, dude, I'm 39 years old, man. Like I'm not even like bulking up for anything. I'm not trying to like I'm trying to stay lean. I'm trying to I'm trying to hope I still fit my Marine uniforms from when I was like 21. But it's like, I find myself at times like getting seconds. I'm like, dude, I'm not even hungry. Why am I doing this? Right. So it's that type of program that I want everybody to just think about for a second. Just bring awareness. You don't have to solve it today, but just be aware. What are you putting your attention to in your life? And where do you think your child's putting their attention to? What they're learning from you?
No, that's absolutely true. And when you talked about scarfing the plate, obviously when I got out of boot camp, I was a savage the way I ate.
Yeah,
it was just
me
like,
too, man.
They're like, bro, we just sat down. How you done? But one thing I used to do, and now that you're saying it, it kind of makes me think that it was like a result of something. But I used to, whenever I would fix my plate, I would hide my food. I would hide my plate while I'm like making it, so that my parents couldn't see me like putting food on the plate. Because like I would always get called like, not called a pig, but like, why are you eating that much? And this, that. So I'm like, man, it's like I feel like I'm being stared at every time I eat. So I would hide my plate in the kitchen while they're in the living room while I'm making my plate, put it in the microwave, and then I would purposely eat on the other side. We had this big pineapple that was always on the it was like a glass pineapple, cookies or whatever you want to put on the inside of it, right? I would always hide my plate behind the pineapple and sit on like the head of the table with my parents in the living room. So when they look over, they're like, they can't see what I'm eating,
Right.
I just felt like, I don't know. I didn't like being stared at, and I always felt like I was always hungry when I was done. And I knew if they heard me getting up and the microwave started back up again, it's like, oh, going back for seconds, huh? It's like, oh.
Yeah. And
sorry, I'm going. What do you want me to do?
Right. And just imagine the impact that's having on you now. Just imagine that, not even the food piece, but like, just imagine you sharing, and thank you for sharing that. Cause this is a very personal and deep conversation that we're having, but like, think about the impact that that's had on you, where the guilt and the shame coming from something that that it came out of want, having guilt or shame about wants, whether it's a second plate of food, or it's wanting more money or more love in your life, or a better relationship with your children, or a better relationship with your parents. If you feel those feelings of guilt and resentment and shame coming up from that, then the disconnect is you deserving to have all of those things, and a lack of being able to take ownership of being blessed with those things in your life, that you get to have what you want and not feel bad about it. But a lot of us didn't grow up like that. I know I didn't. Like, I felt for a really long time guilt and shame around receiving money, which is crazy because like my dad did pretty well and he was always providing for us. And mom struggled, but she's doing better now. But even at that time, you're just making ends meet. That was the programming I was in. I'm just going to make ends meet. I'm just going to get my bills paid. And even the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps doesn't really like pay you big bucks. Listen, I want to just clear this up. I've get asked time to time of this on podcast interviews. Well, it's like, well, they take care of you guys. Yes, they do take care of us. We get clothes and they're not attractive or fashionable. They give us 3 meals a day, but the chow hall is only open for a certain amount of hours. Yes, there's basic needs that are provided. But when you're talking about being in a military branch where it is not about the money, in 2004, $1,100 was a lot of money for somebody who didn't have any bills. Who had a Sprint phone bill, right? Like that's what I had. So, but getting out of the military and realizing that, it's a big playground out here and you can create and have whatever you want. Everybody can get a piece of that. Those feelings of guilt and shame came up with me for a long time, even, negotiating job salaries. I would undercut myself just because I just wanted the job. So I would just, even I was like, I would ask for 10 grand over, and then they would lowball me by 10 grand. I'd be like, cool, I'll take it. Because I had guilt and shame around receiving any sort of value or, but yeah, right. Like, cool, you're great. So I always had a job, but the guilt and shame around receiving compensation for my value and abundance of things that were beyond my value, what I truly wanted for my life, that was a very hard thing for me. And that came from childhood, and that came from, a food behavior that's very similar to yours, right? Like feeling bad that I was eating seconds when mom told me like, hey, it's gonna be a little tight this month.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. And that I'm kind of curious now that obviously, your parents split. And you spent the majority of the time with your mom?
Majority of the time was like, it was kind of a 50-50 split, but I would say from my childhood, mom was maybe like a 55-45 split, just because she had that extra day.
Okay. So like I'm kind of curious to like, what did she transition to doing? Like what was her, did she have a career or a job, or like what did she end up doing, once she finally got on her feet?
Yeah, she was a physical therapist assistant. She worked in healthcare for 30 years, really long time. And, my mom's a helper. So something that I learned I was talking earlier about, generational traits and curses. One of the things that I learned from my mom was the ability to serve and help people out of just helping them. I think that's what gravitated me towards the Marine Corps, was just this ability to serve and to be at a level where you're, the ultimate way of service was putting other people's needs that you did not know before yours. And that's what my mom did in healthcare. It was an appreciation for life. I remember she used to tell me she would have patients dying in the hospital, and she did everything she could to make them comfortable. She would just tell me how grateful she was to be able to seize the moment of life. And, being of service to other people was really a means for her to learn that lesson in healthcare. And I learned from a young age to be welcoming to all people, because, and this is just one of the most powerful lessons I've learned from the Marine Corps, and also one of the most powerful lessons I've learned about, us as humans. I learned from a very young age, it didn't matter what you looked like. It didn't matter. What mattered was you were all human beings. We all put our pants on the same way. And when someone's hungry, it doesn't matter what they look like. You help them out and you feed them the best that you can. I had kids that I played high school football with who were from the not so nice parts of East Palo Alto. And we would bring them to my house to feed them. And we didn't care where they were from. We didn't care anything. We just always had our door open to put food on their table. And that was something that I learned, was we don't let people go hungry. And I learned that from my mom, because in healthcare, it doesn't matter what you look like either. We're all going out the same way. And my mom learned that, people all walks of life were living their last days out, and you help those people. It didn't matter what they did. You helped those people. And that was so powerful to me at such a young age, because it made me appreciate people from all different walks of life, and appreciate them for what they do look like and how they act and where they came from. We're all still human beings, but we all live different lifestyles. When I was in the Marine Corps, it was the same thing. It did not matter what you look like. Everybody wore green, and everybody was in this, everybody was in a foxhole together. Everybody was on a truck together. Everybody was using the showers together. And it was that bond, that camaraderie that I learned. And it was so powerful to me to learn that from my mom, was being of service to people no matter what. It was to being of service to people, no matter where they came from, what they did. It was, if you could help them out, just help them out. And, that's something that has stuck with me for such a long time, is being able to see people as human beings, but also appreciate and receive them from where they've been and where they're going.
Man, it's so incredible, because like kind of tying in what you were talking about before, if your focus is so much on rejecting, right? You said that if you focus so much on one thing, that's all you see. But if you
Yeah.
focus so much on rejecting traits, you're missing the things that you should be accepting. And you found a great part of your mom that you actually accepted, and you've taken on those same traits, and now that becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh, thank you, man. And and it's something that for me that I try to do the best I can to integrate that more and more into my life, because for me it's everybody struggles. Everybody's got different struggles, and everybody's got different things you're dealing with. You shared some stuff with me on the show. I've shared some stuff with you, and these are things that sometimes they just haunt us and they just keep us where we're at. And sometimes those are the things that catapult us to next levels of growth. And for me, as you get older, it's so interesting how much, when you've kind of been weathered and shaped and molded by your experiences in life, how much more difficult it is for you to kind of stay in that youthful exuberance that you once had. And so I fight that every single day to try to create some sort of youthful exuberance or youthful curiosity about the world or about life. And it's really interesting. It's a thing that I'm working on right now, is not so much I'm resisting staying in my old ways. I'm trying to do everything I can to not be just this is the way I like things. I mean, look, real talk, I like my coffee a certain type of way. I'm not going full, I'm not, yeah, I'm not going a full blown, questioning everything. But what I am is I'm asking myself, what is it that I can do to learn something new today that I didn't know before, and receiving that from a place of observation, not from a place of judgment.
So now, what did your dad end up doing? So the reason why I'm saying that is because as I'm asking you these questions, I'm picturing my life, and I'm tying it into what I saw, and I'm tying it into I'm trying to figure out the differences and similarities between different dynamics of families and what happens when the family splits. And I think it's important that people, once you learn to understand what happens, you can kind of visualize that to see, am I moving this way? And maybe it can kind of help you to push back toward this middle point. Maybe if I would have known a lot of these things, or really recognize and realize these things, maybe I would have never been divorced in the first place. Maybe I would have seen some of the signs of these things happening, and maybe you can kind of catch it earlier, or at least, okay, we need to work on this because these things are starting to happen. So I'm kind of curious to see which path your dad went after the divorce, as far as career path, and how that affected him.
So my dad is, to date, the most interesting man I've ever met. And he's kind of a little bit of a Renaissance man. He's very good at a lot of different things, but a master of none. But he's really good at a lot of different things. And my dad has this, he's a 7 on the Enneagram, I was mentioned, which is the enthusiast. And my dad has this youthful exuberance, in his 70s now, of wondering how things work. How does this car run? How do grapes grow in the grow from the ground? There's all these things. My dad's just always had a curiosity. He's an avid reader. He'll read a bunch of stuff. And I think he sticks to his genres, but he reads all the time. And I say that because my dad was in the ad agency business for a very long time, but he's always been an entrepreneur, so he's been in multiple fields. And when he was in the ad agency business, he learned very quickly the power of networking and relationship. He just knew how to talk to people. He was really good at schmoozing, really good at networking. But he knew more than anything about brand and storytelling and connection to people. And so I watched from my dad from a very young age how to connect. how to like build story, how to tell story, how to build relationship, how to market something. And these are just, these are things that we see in the business world on a day-to-day basis. We see this a lot on social media. And, where my dad went was the route of the ad executive. He just loved the industry. He ended up later down the line moving more into the logistics field. So, he kind of moved into, he was a CFO, which was really interesting because he loved being the quote ad agency guy, like the Don Draper from Mad Men. But my dad was a CFO. He's a chief financial officer. He was a books guy. So to watch him play marketing guy and the books guy was really interesting. Later in his career, he moved more towards the logistics field and being the CFO for some bigger companies than what he had built before at the ad agency. And my dad still always gravitated towards building a brand. He was still the marketing guy. So he was pulling double duty at any job or company that my dad had. There was never like a chief marketing officer or a VP of marketing. It was my dad. So watching him do the financial projections and talk about like spending money on advertising and brand and getting in front of people and building relationships and value props, all of these things. I watched my dad, from a very young age become almost inundated in that craft to the point where like I actually thought he was choosing work over me. A majority of my life. I was like, Dad just works all the time. He doesn't like really give two whats about, his relationship with me. My dad missed basketball games. He missed baseball games. He missed trips. He was late from school. He was late picking me up from school a lot. He always made time to like take me to like sports games in the Bay Area. I was very fortunate. I got to go to San Francisco Giants games. I went to a couple 49er games, went to Warriors games. Like this was like pre-Steph Curry. This is like when we were not very good.
So you're an original fan. All right. See.
No. I'm an original fan. Like, no. I'm an original fan. Like I remember the days of like Tim Hardaway, Chris Mullin, and Chris Webber. Yeah. Like Latrell Sprewell. For some of you remember, Ronnie Cycli used to play for the Warriors.
Right there.
Oh yeah, like I remember those days. And for me, like going to those games at the Cow Palace in like back in the day when the Warriors played there, it was one of those things where my dad always made time for me for those sporting events, but he was still connected to work. He'd still have his headphones and he'd still be on client calls. And it was very much like to me as a kid, it was very much spending time with me when he like fitting me into his schedule because he was working so much. And that to me was one of the most profound memories that I had of my dad. Was he always was able to take me to sports games, but I never really truly remembered him from when I was a kid, like being fully present or fully in that. And I don't know if that was just because like his, youthful curiosity was making him think and question about a lot of things. I don't know if it was because of his like Renaissance period of where he was going through this rebirth from being a divorced man to now finding himself and finding his new faith and relationship with life. My dad became a reborn Christian, I remember, from a very young age. And that was a very powerful experience to watch as a young kid. But I remember my dad was just always very curious about the world and always very curious about, the mechanics of things, how things worked.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. It's, man, just thinking about like the tough split because I couldn't even really, my mom had several jobs afterwards. We actually, my parents split when I lived in Bermuda because my dad was a Marine as well. And I remember my mom just staying there for several years. And looking back, it's probably not cheap to move from Bermuda to go to California because that's where we were all at. We were in California. Okay. My dad was stationed in Camp Pendleton after that. And then I remember hearing the news that my mom was, finally moving to California. So that was great, because I hadn't seen her for a few years. And then, her coming to California, obviously it makes it a lot easier instead of taking I don't even know how much money it would cost for a plane ticket. I don't know. But yeah, that whole dynamic, she held on to a few different jobs afterwards. But my dad, obviously, he was still a Marine. He ended up retiring. He, became like a mailman. Some other things that it's just, I felt like he didn't need to do it, but it was just more so because he felt the need to stay busy while in retirement. I think it kind of gives you like a sense of belonging, a sense of like, I
Yeah.
need to do something type thing instead of just like, retiring and then just chilling out. But yeah, I'm glad that ended up happening. It was hard having the separation to where you can only see one and not the other. So I truly do believe, in humanity that women balance men out, men balance women out. And
Yeah.
I think it's very important to have both. And this, yes, I understand there's other dynamics, women, women, men, men. That's not what I'm talking about on this one. But, there's having the hard side all the time with your dad. It's more of a long-term investment. You don't really get short-term gratification by having a strict parent all the time. It's more of what ends up helping you long-term for discipline-wise. Having a mom, which typically the moms are a little bit more nicer. If somebody else's parents is different, you could tell us. But my mom was a little bit more of the nicer one. So having that is a short-term, gratification. It makes you feel better. You don't always feel like you're messing something up. It's not as stressful, Mom's gonna always, get your back on those little things where dad's being extra strict. So that's why it's good to have that balance. And not having that, I definitely do think that affects kids a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the things that has come up in the recent years is, when you were talking about man and woman, the masculine and feminine energies that we all possess, where, there's a softer side to all of us. And then there's more of the direct, aggressive side to us, protector side of us in the form of the masculine energy. And man, woman, it does not matter. We have these energies all within us. If you subscribe to that, right? I know I do. And I find at times that for us, that when we're too much either in one energy or we're in another energy, it does throw us off. It creates, there's a lack of equilibrium within that. And so for me, when I was a kid, and you were talking about that as well. When I was a kid, like both of my parents shifted very much in the masculine. They were very much like mom had to be because she was a fighter, right? Like she was diagnosed with cancer, with leukemia when I was 16 years old. So there was no choice really for her to be in the softer side, except when, I remember this distinctly, is that she told me that, when she was getting treatment, and at the time, when I was 16 years old, AML, which is acute myeloid leukemia, that was seen as a death sentence, less than 50% chance of survival. Bone marrow transplants were like not a thing then. Now I think it's most cancers. There's some cancers where if you catch it early enough, it's like 90%, 85%. It's like a crazy high survival rate.
Right.
So for her, I remember that she told me that one of the few times I saw her really be in the receiving, which is very much more the feminine, which was making the choice and accepting and receiving the opportunity to live a second life, to come out of cancer and to be able to live life. And my mom beat cancer. She's been good for 30 years, or not 30 years, probably less than 25 years. I think my math serves me right. Probably not.
At the same time, because my mom the same thing. My dad, got to give praise to that.
Yeah, it really is. It's a true blessing. And I'm glad to hear that on your end, man. It's really a true blessing. And when to go and using that as an example to go back to the masculine and feminine energies, a lot of us have to be able to create this level of balance in our lives. We often at times we strive to be in like the aggressive state, right? The masculine, the direct, the strength, the grounding, or the women, which is more the flowy, the creative, the light, the nurturing. And I think a lot of us, learn from our parents to be dominant in one of those two energies. And then we spend a lot of our times in our lives trying to figure out how to balance them, right? Like when we're too much in this, in the masculine, when we're too much in the feminine. I share this with all of you because for me, I learned a lot about what energy I was in, more so depending upon which parent was my favorite. Because for me, there were periods in high school where it's like, hey, I have problems with mom. Like mom is she's like on my, you know what, 24/7. And like, I'm tired of this. And so I'm going to go dip out to dad's house because he's a little bit more chill and he's cool. But then you get to dad. And so I wanted to start acting more like my dad. And then I'd be in the energy of my dad where it's like, you know, my dad kind of would always worked, but he always made time. He was a hobbies guy. He still is, always has time for his hobbies. But my dad was very regimented in terms of how you lived your life. It was very much like, do this, but don't do this. It's very military. So then I rejected that. And then I was like, I'm going to go back to mom's house because like I could sneak out of my mom's house and like go hang out with my friends late at night on the school night and didn't like, you know, she would never know because you couldn't wake her up with a bomb going outside her house. Like she was like those deep sleepers. So like I knew that I could sneak out of the house then, but then at that point, mom would start catching me. And so I went through this like shift of like, you know, whatever parent was favorable in my eyes was the one I tried to adopt. And I think a lot of us who have children, a lot of us remember as kids is that we end up like getting into our older age and our teenage years trying to either be like one parent or the other, depending upon who's in favor with us. So it's really interesting. Really interesting.
No, it's so crazy. Like everything you're saying, like literally it almost applies to me. Like every which way or like mantra of like how you speak about these different dynamics, it literally like, I picture me, like, you know, it's, that's amazing. It's good to hear these things because, you know, I ended up joining the military, but I almost didn't join the Marine Corps. So I originally went to the Navy to go see the Navy. My dad was, oh, you're going to go see somebody. I think I was like messing up at work or something. He's like, you ain't got to join, but you need to go talk to somebody. So I walked like 10 miles to go to the recruiting office, you know, end up I want to go to the Navy first because I felt I didn't want to be like my dad in certain areas. And I felt like if I would have joined the Marine Corps, I would have too many similar traits as him. And I didn't want to do that. So that goes on to the whole rejecting again. So the Navy wasn't there. So I'm like, all right, went to the Army. Army was at lunch. I'm like, all right. So I'm like literally leaving. And of course, the typical recruiter story, right? Guess who's there? The Marine recruiter's there, of course.
Yeah, always.
And he's like, hey, who are you looking for? I was like, I have an appointment with the Navy. He's like, oh, okay. Well, you want to just like sit in my office? You can wait for it in here. And there he goes, you know? And it ended up coming down to where I was like, I don't know. And they were like, well, you know, you probably couldn't hack it anyway. All right, dude. Like, stop it. So I ended up joining, and it's surprising to me, like I said, because I didn't want to become what I thought, how I portrayed my dad in a lot of instances. So I'm kind of curious to like, with all those things being said, with how you looked at, you know, how strict your dad was, how it had to be a certain way. It was almost like you were in a militant life. What made you want to join?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's so funny because as I said before, and we were discussing about the idea of rejection and you becoming the thing that you reject, I ended up finding myself being in this very regimented lifestyle where my dad was a very pretty much like a born again, hardcore Christian. And it was like, the Bible says this, and I'm going to live by way the best that I can in terms of Jesus. And my mom was like, I'm just doing everything I can to make sure that like I wake up tomorrow and like the bills are paid. Like, so it's very different, right? So you have a place of survival and a place of discipline and structure. So discipline and structure was through the book, but then at my mom's, it was like, we're going to do whatever we have to do, whatever it takes for us to get by to the next day. I joined the Marines because I was tired of being pushed and pulled into these different lifestyles, and I wanted something that could give me a foundation for a good life. Now, I didn't think about money or equate money to having a good life. What I equated to having a good life was being able to have an operating system that I could default to when stuff hits the fan, when things don't go right, being able to be accountable and responsible for your actions. Because from a young age, I was also seeing that greatness in people and those who are, we consider successful folks, they have a level of accountability and ownership that a majority of people do not have. They just don't have, like, those people at that top level, the people we revere in our society, they have a level of accountability, ownership, and responsibility that majority of people don't have. And when I went, shopping, so to speak, to go find a branch to join right after 9/11 happened, I remember for me, the attraction to the Marine Corps was, we're not going to give you anything. We're going to give you the opportunity to earn everything. So when that was a hell of a sales pitch, because for a guy like me seeking purpose, for a guy like me who was seeking an operating system that I could default to, the Marine Corps gave me the chance to really thrive. But it wasn't going to say like, oh, here you go. Here's like here's your 300 thread count Egyptian sheets. Here's like your queen size bed. Here's like, your own private room during boot camp. There was none of that. There was no comfy accommodations. This was very much like, if you want to be this and you want to know what it's like and what it takes to be a Marine, and not only that, what it means to be in the upper echelon of high performers and people, this is your opportunity to do so. And so the Marine Corps to me was actually the thing that was actually the result of the lifestyle that I rejected from dad, which was, I didn't want a regimented lifestyle for my dad, yet I went to the Marines for 4 years. And I craved for it, which was also ironic now that I'm thinking about this. It was also like completely against what I truly wanted in life, was complete and total freedom. So here I am getting my personal rights being stripped away for the next 4 years. But I was like, I wanted to go out and not be told what to do. Like, not have somebody like breathing down my neck, not having a drill instructor like throw stuff at me. I didn't want any of that. So it's funny because that rejection led me to the Marines. And what I found in the Marines is that through boot camp, through war, through living, doing a tour in Okinawa, 2 tours in Iraq, coming home, the one thing I learned more than anything is there is something about the bond of people in shared misery. You form your best friendships, or your strongest friendships, at least for me. My strongest friendships all came out of the places where it was absolute hell to be. Boot camp, had great friends. Warzone, great friends. Great friends. Being in Japan by yourself as a 19-year-old and like never traveling outside the US before, great friendships. And that's something that I miss. I miss that. I miss the brotherhood. I miss the I don't miss being miserable. Don't get it twisted. I don't miss being miserable. But I miss the friendships that I made in those trying times, because all you had was each other. And all you had was your thoughts and your feelings and your perspectives on life. And there was somebody there who was just as miserable as you, who was willing to share and was willing to listen to you. And that's, I miss those. I miss those types of relationships. There's nothing like them.
The crazy part about that is when you ask anybody, most Marines, military personnel, but hey, what was your experience at boot camp? You're going to get one or two answers. You're like, I absolutely hated it. It was the worst thing ever. You're gonna be, oh, it was amazing. Very few people go, it was like, what? No, it's usually one extreme or the other.
Right.
For the ones that say that, oh, it was amazing, they're not, it's not that they don't remember the IT, the negative being hungry parts. It's just the good times. It's almost like your mind naturally reverts back to good feeling for a reason, because it was so stressful that your mind naturally goes to where, like, the good place, the happy place type thing. And it remembers that, because so you got these guys that all boot camp was easy, this and that. I was like, oh, so you would go back? Absolutely not. I was like, see? Because
yeah, right.
There's no way I would do that again.
Yeah, right. And then that's what I mean is when you think about what, like, I think about boot camp, and one of the most powerful things I learned about boot camp was I had a drill instructor who was on me, and I'll never forget him. It's drill instructor Sergeant Jake Roberts. I will never forget this man for the rest of my life. This dude rode me like a jockey, just was straight up on my 24/7.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody be like, not even my mom or my dad came close to how much this man was just in my stuff. He just was. And I remember there was a point in boot camp where I almost quit. I really thought about going AWOL. I was like, I'm going to throw on my green sweatsuit, and did not think this through at all the time. So it's like, I'm not like copying to anything here, but I'm just telling all of you, this was for me. I was about to throw on my green sweatsuit, and I was going to jump the fence at MCRD San Diego. And I was like, no one's going to find me because I'm just going to like blend in my green sweatsuit in the bushes, and I'll just make it home. And I almost broke. And I remember Sergeant Roberts, in a drill instructor loving way, basically told me, do not give up on yourself. And I think for a lot of us that went through boot camp, we take for granted how much these drill instructors really believed in us before we learned how to believe in ourselves. And he told me, do not give up on yourself. He's like, are you going to go home a quitter? I didn't get in trouble. I wasn't dressed in my green sweatsuit, like ready to hop the fence. But by the way, there's barbed wire there. Like, it was, yeah, right. Like, no one's going to find me. So ridiculous. But like, no one's going to find, but I remember he said to me straight up, like he really said to me, do you want to go home a quitter? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, then go back over there where you're supposed to be. And I finished boot camp. And I remember when I got my Eagle Globe and Anchor, I held out my hand and I started crying. And he just looked at me and he said, I believed in you before you could believe in you. But the moment that you found out that you could do anything that you want, if you just allowed yourself to do it, that's the reason why you're standing here and I'm giving you this. And I always believed in you. I was just waiting for you to believe in yourself. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that.
Sick.
I'll never forget that. And he told my dad that. He said, your son was about to quit, but what your son learned about himself is that he learned that he's capable of doing anything if he puts his mind to it. And that to me was the most powerful. That to me was so powerful from boot camp, just learning the power of the relationship, but also the power that we have as individuals to commit ourselves to that type of pain and misery for 13 weeks. And then think like, oh, that was the hardest part of the Marine Corps. No, that was just a taste. And that was, and for a lot of people, that was a precursor to just the difficulties and the curveballs of life. 13 weeks of boot camp. But that Eagle Globe and Anchor meant something to me. It meant something to me. It was like, I still, like to this day, when I'm encountering something not as tough, because those days are behind me, I'm not doing like crazy physical challenges like that. But when the days get tough, I always think about like, I have to be able to believe in myself before I can have anybody else believe in me. I have to believe in myself with true, unadulterated conviction. And I have to remember that, Sergeant Roberts told me I could do anything if I put my mind to it. And I take that seriously. But yeah, those were the days, man. Those were the days.
That's tough because, obviously, especially back then, especially the green belt, they're like very great actors. And I learned that after being a drone instructor, like you're a great actor. Because I literally thought my drone instructors hated me, and maybe they did. But I ended up getting in touch with only one of my drone instructors. The one I told you I ran into, at a meeting in Florida. But he had emailed me back, not right away. I think every rank I picked up, I emailed him, hoping I would get a response. And I think once he became a lieutenant, he messaged back Like, oh, good to hear from you. Like there wasn't like 8 other ones before, you know. Uh, but it was good because it seemed very genuine. There was like a genuine respect when I saw him, you know, and his face lit up when he told people that I was his recruit in that meeting. He was a captain already, you know, and originally he was trying to get out. He was just like, yeah, I'm done. And they're like, hey, in order for you to retire at that rank, you got to do at least 1 more year. He's like, all right. And then he just kept going. And now he's a major now. But for that second to where, you know, when I hear him talking about me, you know, and the crazy part is like he remembered certain things about me from 15 years ago. You know, I think I was only in at 15 years at that point. It is wild, you know, like it means something. Like I ran into my recruits and it like to be able to say, yeah, that was my recruit. Like it means something to me, you know?
Yeah. And it's very much, you know, it's very much something that I hope that at the end of my life, I look back and I have that same type of impact, you know, an effect that you have when you look at somebody. You took a young man, you know, if you were at MCRD, you took a young man and you transformed his life, and he'll never forget you for that. I hope at the end of my life I can have that same effect where I look back and I see all these people that I helped, and I go, man, I remember when I coached that person. I remember when I worked with that person. I remember when that company was this big and now they're this big and they're this big. That's all I strive. You know, that's one of the main things I strive for is that I want to be able to have that type of impact in my life like that.
Man, this is incredible. And as you can hear my dog in the background going crazy. So I know we didn't really go too much into the you know the combat deployments because hopefully we can get together and like have a whole segment specifically on that. But you know, as I told you earlier, you know, I want to mention your book, but I also want to go over the 3 quotes that I picked from your Instagram. So you're the author of a book called The Road Ahead and Miles Behind, a story of healing and healing between father and son. And when I read that title, and I still have to go, I plan on purchasing it. I want to read into it because I want to see how similar what we talked about today kind of goes into that book. But I wanted to kind of emphasize the whole connection between parents and the dynamic of you know, single parenthood and, you know, being divorced. I wanted to kind of emphasize on that because I figured your book had a lot to do with it and kind of like how you fit into the place. So can you kind of talk about your book just a little bit and then let people know where they can get it from?
Yeah, absolutely. So The Road Ahead and Miles Behind is a story of a 2020 road trip that I took with my dad. In the middle of what is deemed by a lot of people to be one of the worst years in human history, the COVID pandemic, I got an opportunity. Some people can call it divine intervention. Some people call it the big man upstairs, you know, intervening into my life. Whatever you want to call it, supernatural force. Somehow or some way, there was an energetic exchange between my dad and I where he called me out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to go on a road trip with him. Now, to give you some context, as you know, you've heard me previously talk about my dad. The dark side of my dad is that I never felt truly accepted or loved by him because I always thought work was the real goal. Emotional connection for a young boy and his father is extremely important, especially for all the dads, at least in in the work that I've done on myself and the work I've done with some people is that, you know, young boys seek emotional bonding and love and connection from their fathers, and they emulate their fathers in every way possible. Why? Because you are the first man that they see in the world. You are them. You are the example. So from a young age, I watched my dad, and I ended up growing resentment and hatred and frustration towards him. So imagine for almost 30 years, mixed in those years were not speaking to him, not wanting anything to do with him, not feeling loved or cared for, thinking everything was about money with him, to now have your father in the middle of this COVID pandemic ask you to go on a road trip, ask me to go on a road trip with him to hang out because we haven't had personal time. I was like, man, you must be so high and out of your mind to ask me that.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I almost said no. I wanted to say no because I wanted to be able to give him the big F you, because I was like, you didn't show up to the games I wanted you to show up, which is very important for kids. Kids expect you to be at every single game. And sometimes as parents, you can't. You do the best you can, but sometimes you can't. Just work. Other things come into play. I wanted him to show up every game. I wanted him to just like talk to me about life and different things. And I learned some of that stuff just by watching him, but I never got that emotional connection from him that I wanted. And so I wanted to tell him no. But that divine intervention, that interference from the big man upstairs said, you need to go on this road trip with your dad, Michael, because it might be the only one that you get with him. And I remember I paused and I sat in that as I listened to my dad do his whole ad executive speech about, well, think about all the good times that we have. Like, we're going to see America, which, by the way, we were driving through West Texas. And if you ever driven through West Texas, no offense to the people that live out west, there's not a whole lot out there. Not a whole lot out there. But but hearing that from my dad, and then hearing this, this very powerful, mighty voice tell me that this might be the only trip that I ever get with my dad of this magnitude, I had to trust my gut. Here we are. The country's shut down. We're wearing masks. People are scared. People are afraid. People are dying from this, very horrible disease. People are losing their jobs, chaos all around. And in the midst of what is, to me, to this day, is one of the biggest growth years of my life, I have this thing to hand it to me to repair the relationship with my dad. And maybe, just maybe, I might get a chance to do that. So the book entails our 11-day road trip. We drove from Las Vegas to Sebring, Florida to go to a automobile race because that was one of the few sports that was still running. Limited capacity. And we drove in a Mercedes Sprinter van together. And if you guys don't know what that is, you see those things every day when Amazon drives to your house. Yeah, right.
Nice.
They are, but it's not nice when you're with the man that you've had resentment and anger and frustration with for almost 30 years of your life. So the book entails our stories of healing, the power of tough conversations, getting a chance to know my dad, and being able to recognize and understand and love him for who he is and what he's done, which I alluded to in the beginning of the podcast, that I no longer had to reject my dad. All I had to do was accept him. And the way that I accepted him was to forgive myself and accept myself so I can forgive and accept him. And the moment that happened, our relationship changed forever. So the book tells all these stories. There's anecdotes, there's lessons on love and compassion and the moments that we get with our parents, the very few moments that we have left with our parents as they get older and we get older, and not letting those times go by. And so you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's a book that I'm really proud of. It's a book that I've had people DM me and write reviews that said it's transformed their relationship. I had one guy, I'll never forget this, reach out to me and tell me that he read my book and he decided to go talk to his dad finally. And I said, wow, that's amazing. When was the last time you saw your dad? He said 3 years ago. I said, oh, really? Where does he live? He lives 2 streets over from me.
No way.
2 streets over. And I said, wow, you haven't talked to him? No, I hated my dad. But I realized that I hated him because I didn't accept him. But what if I actually accepted him? And so he said, I read your book and I went over there, and now we went and golfed and drank some beers and we talked. And I thought that to this day is one of the best comments or best messages I've ever got. And I'm so grateful to receive that. So I hope you go out and buy it. I hope you enjoy the story. And I hope for those of you out there that have something with your parents, have a grievance or a grievance or some sort of resentment or complaint against them. I hope you read this book and see that your parents did the best they could with what they had at the time that they had it. And they need you just as much as you need them.
That is incredible. I definitely want to make sure. And what I'll do also is I'll have my editor put I'll have them put the link for the book in the description below.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Man, I'm like really looking forward to that, because I'm like imagining what those conversations had to started like, and where it could have gone. From Vegas to Florida is a long distance.
Yeah.
Especially if there was like these long pauses of silence where it's like, who's gonna start this off? So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll definitely follow up once I do read it. I'm looking forward.
Yeah, man, that would be great, and thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and and anybody reads the book and has something they want to contribute to the book, please DM me on Instagram at mike.liguori, Liguori. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you thought of it, and maybe how it's changed your life as well. I always love hearing those stories. It's amazing. It's just amazing how many stories I've heard so far about people just reaching out to their parents.
No, absolutely, and I'll make sure I put your tags down below as well. But I do got three quotes on 3 different posts that I see on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Once I looked at your Instagram and I kind of saw like what the general theme was, I was like, okay, let me see if I can figure out 3 of these quotes that will kind of resonate to me. And I wanted to see like what your reasoning for picking these to put on your post was.
Yeah.
And your idea behind it. So the first one is: success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So what does that mean to you?
Life is all about the journey, not the destination. It is not about what you achieve in this lifetime. It is not about acquiring things. It is not about how much you have at the end of your life. It is about the ride that you took. And it's very important for everybody, especially for me. This is something I've learned recently, is that when we talk about the journey, when you talk about where you're going in life, too many of us are bypassing the actual experience in the process of building and trying to get to the next top of the hill. And we don't enjoy the climb. We don't enjoy the view because we always feel like we're falling behind somebody else. This to me is an amplification of social media. We're just constantly being inundated with other people's successes and failures. But the big thing is that if you really want to create a magnificent and amazing life, see how many journeys you can go on and see how much you can actually truly experience the journey for what it is. Because you're going to get to your destination if you're in the journey. You're just going to. If you just keep walking, if you just keep moving forward, you will get to where you want to go in life. But treasure the journey, because once that's over, you don't get to experience that ever again the same way that you did. There's a famous quote I'll share with you. It's one of my favorite quotes. No man steps in the same river twice, for he is not the same man and he is not the same river.
Okay.
And if you get that, if you really think about that for a second, you only do life once. This is the only time you get to do it. That's what that quote means to me.
No, that's a great point. That's a great, man, I love this. All right. Quote number 2. The thing that holds you back from your dream life is the belief that you don't deserve to live it.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones I put out. So when we were talking about earlier about what you reject and what you attract, is that most people want wealth, they want health and love. So there's 3 eternal markets whenever it comes to like building products or even just things in general.
Right.
And it's wealth, it's health, and it's love. Everybody wants to be healthy. Everybody wants to have a ton of money or just money coming in all the time. Right. And everybody wants to give love and receive love or be in love. So in those eternal markets, we all want those things. But the thing that stops us from actually having those things is the belief that we deserve to be wealthy, to be in love, to receive money or to be healthy. It's really something that stops us from getting what we want. And if you're allowing yourself to receive things and create things for yourself without having guilt or shame or any sort of attachment to it, but just merely to create a journey into achieving those things, that is a dream life. You can have all of those things. But the thing that's going to stop you from getting all those things is only you, nobody else. And so if you have a belief or a wall or guilt or resentment around money, about your health, around you're never going to find someone to marry and fall in love with, you don't think anybody loves you, those are the things that keep you from living that dream life.
Tough. That's tough. I like that one. All right, last one. You've had 1,000 ideas that you didn't come to life because you were too scared to make it real.
Yeah. Everybody has ideas, not everybody has execution. So ideas are just ideas until you put them out there in the world and you make it happen. So a lot of us have these dreams and have these ideas, and we always gravitate towards the dream or the idea. Why? Because it looks good in our heads and it's safe for us to manifest and create these ideas for us. Like, man, I can't wait someday to be rich. Well, of course you can't wait to be rich, because in your mind, that's all you're thinking about. But you're not doing anything. You're not putting it into action because you're scared. So when you say, I want to, if you look at kids, and this is one of my favorite things that I see with just my days being a kid, I'm sure your days being a kid, and and your son, right? It is one of the things that you look at is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are the first things? I want to be an astronaut.
Yep.
Do we ever ask him, well, how are you going to do that? No, I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a dinosaur. Like, they are so convicted. They're so convicted. And the problem is that when we get older, we don't have that same level of conviction in our own ideas. We give up because we're too stuck in the how and the why, and we're not just allowing ourselves to just take the dream and just go after it. So if you're like, I want to be rich or I want to be wealthy, then just go do it. Figure it out. Enjoy the journey and the process to it. But don't just have wealth be an idea in your head. Have wealth be a reality for you.
Oh, man, that's incredible right there.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I picked those 3 quotes because, especially that last one, everybody about the ideas I remember when I was like first starting to create my channel, I spent every single day, I'd come home from work and I would sit there and I would stay there until I at least filled up 1 page of ideas and notes. And a lot of those ideas and notes stayed on that notepad, but a lot of them made it to, into fruition, and I put it into action. There's still a lot of ideas out there that's floating around that like I believed in at the time. And obviously as you go along, you determine what's more realistic, right, and what's not. But it's the fact of you're learning how to create an idea. A lot of people don't understand that creating an idea actually takes time, and it takes work as well. It's not something you just think of overnight. Like you wake up like, oh, okay, this is how you invent this. No, it takes time for you to sit there by yourself, no distractions, and focus and really hone in on what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. And something that I teach with my clients as well, and in a lot of the things that I do in just my personal coaching practice is, we teach about the 4 stages of will. And in these 4 stages, you really talk about if you want to create massive transformation, you have to be willing to go through these 4 stages of will. And in the 4 stages of will, one of the stages is the most powerful stage. And the stage is the willing to commit. The willingness to commit. And in the willingness to commit, you can have all the ideas in the world. You can create everything. You can be aware of all of your trauma, and you can be aware of your childhood and all the things you did right or wrong, good or bad. It does not matter. If you have the willingness to commit to what you want in your life, what you're willing to create, you will get it. But you have to be willing to commit for it, and you have to put that thing into action. And ideas, everybody has them. Everybody has ideas. It doesn't make you special, you having ideas. What makes you special is, can you take an idea and put it into action and run with it? And not every idea you're going to have is a great idea. Sorry, that's just the way that it happens. Not every idea is great. If you think all our ideas are great, well, good luck to
Yeah,
you, because it's, but when I teach this framework to a lot of people about the 4 stages of will, one of the things when we get to the commit phase, we look at everything that we've done and we say, am I willing to commit to this new life that I have for myself? Am I willing to do what's necessary and required for me to do that? You were talking about earlier about the food plate thing.
yeah.
And if you think about this for the food plate thing, it's guilt and shame associated with wanting more of what you have been receiving, right? You have received food and it's the willingness to want more. You had guilt and shame. You had guilt and shame around more of what you wanted. How many of you out there right now have had the exact same feelings around money, around love, around changing locations, buying your dream home? The willingness to commit to changing your life. You can be aware of things, and to just go through the 4 stages real quick. It's the willingness to be aware, the willingness to change, the willingness to create, and the willingness to commit. If you go through all 4 of those stages and you're willing to go through all of that, you will end up finding out how close these ideas, these dreams that you have for yourself really truly are. Because these stages are levels of questions that you can ask. Am I aware? Am I willing to be aware that what I'm currently doing right now in my circumstances is not going to get me to my dreams? Am I willing to change my circumstances in order for me to go after the thing that I want or change my life? Am I willing to create a life that is much better than the one I'm currently living right now? Am I willing to commit to making that life a reality for me right now? Notice how I use the word now. I did not say later. I did not say 30 days from now. I did not say 60 days. I said right now. Because the only thing that really matters is right now. And so in these stages and in these processes and a lot of the work that I do, that's really what you think when you think about it. If we want to create massive change, this is just what I found the framework to be super helpful with. It's asking yourselves those qualifying questions about being able to create massive transformation in your life, which means if you don't like what you're living right now and you don't like where you're at right now, you can change it right now. All you have to do is be willing to commit to creating that new life for yourself.
Man, that is so the 4 stages of will. I'm gonna definitely write that down because I'm gonna look.
Yeah,
that
4
up.
stages of will. Yeah, I'll definitely, like, after this, I'll definitely like take you through some deeper framework with that, more in depth with it, man, because I think it'd be really helpful for just what we've talked about. But for anybody out there, when you're looking at the 4 stages of will, what exactly that is, it is a way for you to process and identify the areas in your life where you feel you are falling behind. And it is normal for you, and it is okay for you to feel short in life. You are a goal-seeking human being. You were not built to sit on the couch. And if you think you are, you're not living up to your potential. All of us in our brains and in our minds and in our lives have a goal. Maybe some of us, are still trying to find our purpose. We're still trying to find our mission in life, and that's okay. That's part of the journey that you're on right now. But I want you to be able to recognize that you were built to achieve and create goals for yourself. And so if you feel as though that you're willing and ready and able to change massively in your life right here and right now, put yourself through the 4 stages of will. What am I willing to become aware of that's not working in my life? I am not really good at my finances, might be an example. I eat too much. I don't work out. I don't show up to my job on time. I'm 10, 15 minutes late every single day. I'm not present in meetings. I'm not present with my children. I'm not present, whatever it is. There's 20 million different things. I put myself through this framework at least once a quarter, and I always find something new. And I go, ooh, if I really want to be a better writer, I've written 2 books and I'm still trying to find ways to be a better writer. Maybe I need to read a little bit more. And I wasn't willing to commit to reading more than I wanted to. So I had to put myself through that framework to say, if I wanted to write more books, if I wanted to be able to talk more about these ideas that I had to be willing to become aware of what wasn't working, willing to change that, willing to create new circumstances, and then being able to commit to that new practice for myself. So I'll put you through that, but that's just a brief rundown of how I look at things.
No, that's absolutely incredible. And I just want to remind everyone again, like I said, I'll have a link down in the description down below. The road ahead and miles behind. Um, Mike Liguori speaks on the road trip with his father in 2020. Um, I am very much looking forward to it. You have been an extreme guest, and you are always welcome on the platform.
Thank you,
Whatever,
man.
however you
Thank
want
you.
to collaborate in the future, I'm absolutely all about it. I can already tell you're just an asset of a person to know. Your energy is absolutely
Thank you.
amazing, and you know, it just puts the icing on top that you're a vet as well. Just
Well,
just having like, yeah.
hey, well, first of all, thank you so much, man, for your time. I'm extremely grateful being on the show, and thank you for just including me in part of your community that you built and all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it, man, and thank you. And then, yes, would love to come back on and talk more. And any way I could be of service to you and the community at large, please, I would be more than happy to do so.
Absolutely, everybody. Mike Liguori.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna stop recording, and then if you just want to hold on for a second, I'll see you afterwards.
Yeah, of course. But yeah,
All right.
I got about 15 minutes before my next call. But yeah, man, that more than happy to.
Easy day.